Argentina is not new to me. I got to live in Buenos Aires for 6 or 7 months in 2006. I really got to get a good feel for the city. It's just massive. It has tons of energy. The nightlife doesn't start until 2 in the morning. It's got amazing restaurants, steak, wine, anything you want at any time of day. It's unbelievable. So this trip for me was a chance to get out of the Northeast. It's been a long winter, a lot of snow, and I set off on a solo adventure to the bottom of the world. So there's something you should know about me. I'm not a planner. I'm never going to win any awards for having everything mapped out before I go. When Phil and I travel, our approach is almost always the same. You kind of have an idea of where you're going to go. We always try to rent a car so that we have the flexibility to do anything we want. But after that, we just go with the flow and let the current of adventure take us away. And this trip was not any different. Next stop, Ushuaia. So picture this. I get off the plane, I get my backpack, I get my video camera. I've got no car, I've got no map, and I have no idea if there's even a campground in town. And within an hour, I was at the campsite, $5 a night. I'd set up my tent. It was a nice day, probably 70, 75 degrees. And I decided that I'd go for a hike up the ski slope behind the campsite to get a look at the glaciers that were at the top of the hill. And that is when my adventure began.
Well, I made it back, safe and sound into the car. I'm dry and I'm warm, but not a minute too soon. I'm down here in Argentina, Ushuaia, the bottom of the world. I hiked up after making camp to try and get a look at the glacier at the top of the hill. It was about 75 degrees, and it just turned in a heartbeat. We had a hailstorm. I ended up sprinting down the mountain as fast as I could, barely made it back. It's a problem being down here at the bottom of the world. They say you can get 4 seasons in one day. I've seen 3 so far, and I've only been here 20 minutes. I learned my lesson. Always come prepared.
So after getting chased down the mountain by a hailstorm, I was cold, I was wet, I was tired, and I'd had it. I was starving, and I went into town to get something to eat. I had a great meal, but I had to eat by myself, which is something that you kind of have to get used to sometimes if you're traveling alone. One of the cool things about being on your own, though, is that you get to meet lots of interesting people that you can hook up with on your adventure. And in this trip, that certainly happened. On my second day in Ushuaia, I decided I was going to hike up to the Albino Glacier. It's a leisurely all-day hike up to a lagoon at the base of a small glacier that's been receding for several years. On this day, I was lucky enough to meet up with 3 young Israeli hikers, so I didn't have to make the trek alone. It was about a 4 or 5 hour day, nice leisurely hike through some bogs, past ponds. We paralleled a river, and we ended up, after about 3 or 4 hours, passing a waterfall and getting to the shores of a lagoon at the base of the glacier. We stopped and had lunch together. We talked politics and current affairs, all in the backdrop of some really jagged snow-capped peaks. It was just a phenomenal way to spend the day. One of the cool things about Ushuaia is that it used to be one of the most important port cities on Earth. Before the Panama Canal was open, the only way between the Atlantic and the Pacific was around the Horn, and Ushuaia was the major port city. Now it's mostly used as a launching pad to Antarctica. And being that we were so close to Antarctica, one of the things we really wanted to do was see some of the wildlife from that area. So I met some friends at the campground, and 4 of us decided to get in the rental car and drive down to a place called Estancia Haberton. It was a great drive, really beautiful scenery, shaped by the wind. We got down to the Estancia hoping that we could get on a boat and go out and walk with the penguins. Now, unfortunately, when the bus arrived from Ushuaia, it was full and we couldn't get a spot. So we were really bummed out, but we were lucky enough, as luck would have it, that a little juvenile penguin put on a show for us for about a half an hour. And not to be outdone, an Arctic tern started dive bombing right in front of us. We had a picnic down at the bottom of the world, a nice leisurely drive back, had a nice communal grill at the end of the night, and for my last night in Ushuaia, it was really a fitting send-off and just a great way to spend the day.
My trick is to get really drunk. My trick is to get really drunk. I just realized that the camera was on for all of that. That whole exchange. Stays light till almost 11 o'clock at night. So we're going to do a little bit of grilling on the parrilla, some chorizo and some sausage, and call it a night. One more night here, and then it's off to El Chaltán, Frito Moreno Glacier.